Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's pretty personal and, often not talked about at all. Why do so many men in our modern world feel, well, lost, adrift? According to the book Taboo, The Lost Codes of Men by Martin Brossman, the reason is that we've actually lost the blueprints, the social structures that are supposed to guide boys into manhood. This question from the author himself just hits right at the heart of the problem, doesn't it? It's that huge gap between what society expects a man to be on the outside and what he's actually feeling on the inside. The book's whole argument is that this feeling isn't some personal failure. It's a symptom of a much, much bigger cultural issue. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get into what Brossman actually means by these lost codes and the personal journey that led him to this whole theory. Then we'll unpack his core model, what he calls the 4 pillars of maturation. After that, we'll look at what happens when those pillars are missing, and finally, what the book suggests we can do about it. Okay, let's start with the book's central idea, the lost codes of men. Brossman's big claim is that a really powerful taboo has taken hold in our culture, and that taboo makes it almost impossible to even talk about the specific, unique developmental needs that boys and men have. Brossman takes this definition and applies it to manhood. He says our culture has basically forbidden us from acknowledging that boys need certain social structures, these codes, to mature properly. Think about things like traditional rites of passage or community mentorship. His theory is that in our rush to modernize, we've just tossed these essential tools aside without realizing we were creating a pretty dangerous void. Now, what's really fascinating here is how Brossman came up with this theory. It wasn't from some dusty academic library. Nope. It came out of a deep personal crisis that led to one of those lightning bolt moments of clarity. So the story kicks off around 1995, right after his marriage fell apart. He was searching for answers, and he started listening to Robert Bly's audiobook Iron John, and all of a sudden he just starts crying, but he has no idea why. That experience led him to a mentor, a guy named Fred Boyles, who challenged him to go to this men's development weekend. And that event completely changed his perspective. A little while later, a friend asked him to explain what he'd learned, and bam, the entire model just poured out of him, right there onto a restaurant napkin. But there was this one pivotal moment early on with his mentor. See, Brossman was pretty skeptical that any man could really, truly keep his word all the time. So when his new mentor, Fred, missed their scheduled Sunday call, Brossman waited a few days and then called him, basically expecting to hear some kind of excuse. But that is not what happened. Fred's response was something Brossman had literally never heard from another man. Instead of making excuses, he took total 100% ownership. He just said, "I broke my word to you." And then, and this is the part that changes everything, he asked, "What would it take to make it up to you?" Brossman was totally caught off guard, so he jokingly suggests 25 push-ups. And get this, over the phone, he hears his 50-year-old mentor get on the floor and do every single one, with other men counting along in the background. It wasn't about the push-ups, right? It was about the integrity. That simple act of just cleaning it up showed Brossman a completely different way to be a man and proved to him how serious this work really was. It was that incredible lesson in accountability that helped his whole model finally click into place. And that brings us right to the heart of the book, the framework he sketched out on that napkin, the thing he calls the 4 pillars of maturation. These are the 4 essential ingredients that he argues are absolutely necessary for a boy to grow into a mature, responsible adult. And Brossman sees them as a sequence, with each pillar building right on top of the last. So let's take a look at each one. The absolute foundation of the whole thing is what he calls sufficient mothering energy. This is all about that nurturing, responsive care, that emotional connection, usually from a mom or another female caregiver, that gives a kid a safe, secure base to start from. Next up, you've got sufficient fathering energy. Brossman defines this as the influence from positive male role models who do more than just protect a boy. They actively prepare him for the world as it actually is, with all its challenges. Now, pillar 3 is the one Brossman says has almost completely vanished from modern society: finding a place among men. This is that formal initiation, that rite of passage, where a boy is intentionally brought into the community of men and finds his sense of belonging there, with them. And finally, at the very top, we have the 4th pillar, mentoring and mastery. This is where a young man learns a real skill from a mentor. It's a process that teaches them focus, delayed gratification, and it builds this deep, earned confidence that nobody can just give you. It has to be built. So here's the critical question. What happens when these pillars are shaky, or maybe they're not there at all? Well, the book argues that the consequences are really, really severe, not just for individuals, but for all of society. And this number just shows you how high the stakes are. Brossman directly connects the lack of these maturation structures to a major crisis in men's mental health. I mean, in the US alone, men make up somewhere between 70 and 80% of all suicides. Statistics like that, he says, are a giant red flag that something is fundamentally broken. Without a healthy road to maturity, Brossman says men often end up falling into one of two unhealthy patterns. On one side, you have the snag, the sensitive new age guy. He's in touch with his feelings, but he lacks that core strength. As the book puts it, he has a heart, but no spine. On the other extreme, you get the dominating man, who's trying to fill some inner void by controlling everything and everyone around him. And on a bigger scale, the book ties this failure to mature men to some of our biggest societal problems. You see young men turning to gangs to find the initiation and belonging they can't get anywhere else. You get adults who are really just boys in men's bodies. And Brossman argues that all this internal instability is a root cause of dysfunction that ends up affecting every single one of us. Brossman then throws this really challenging question out there, which kind of highlights the resistance we're up against. There's this suspicion that pops up when men get together to do this kind of personal work. And he's asking us to really think, where does that fear come from? And more importantly, what would it take to overcome it? Okay, so after all of that, where do we possibly go from here? Well, the last part of the book isn't about giving us easy answers. It's really about starting a conversation and just pointing us in a different direction. The author is super clear on this from the get-go. There is no magic bullet. The point of Taboo isn't to be another self-help book with a 5-step plan. Its real purpose is to sound an alarm and to kickstart a difficult but absolutely necessary conversation about how we can start to consciously rebuild these lost codes for maturity. And really, the biggest takeaway is this. Brossman presents this as a human issue, not just a men's issue. He says over and over that supporting boys on their journey is not a zero-sum game that somehow takes away from girls. Instead, he argues that helping men mature actually gets to the root causes of problems that hurt everyone. So this work ultimately benefits us all. In the end, the book leaves us with this one profound and pretty challenging thought. If the old maps to adulthood are gone, if the instruction manuals have all been lost, whose job is it to write the new ones? The unspoken answer, of course, is that it's on all of us.